On the line with us, and we're going to get to your calls in just a moment, apropos of our topic here. But first, Art Cullen is with us. He's a prize-winning, Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist and editor. He's got a new book out. In fact, I have it right here in my hand. Storm Lake: A Chronicle of Change, Resilience, and Hope from Heartland newspaper. He's the editor of the Storm Lake Times, and but you know, he's a reporter, a journalist in Iowa, and Elizabeth Warren was just there. Art, welcome to the program.
Well, thanks for having me, Tom. I appreciate it.
Thanks for joining us. So tell me, how is Elizabeth Warren being received in Iowa?
I was actually sort of stunned at the reception. It was, she was embraced by huge crowds, lines outside of every venue in 5 cities that she visited. And they were actually broadcasting outside to people in, you know, January on a January night.
You know, I didn't see any of this in the media. Was it was absolutely that way everywhere she went?
Yes, Council Bluffs, Sioux City, Storm Lake, my hometown, a town of about 10 to 15,000 people. We don't know how many are actually here because so many are immigrant. But, yeah, I would say the crowd was well over half female and hair as gray as mine. And she received a very warm embrace when she talked about taking on corporate power.
So, oh, that's interesting. Were you seeing young people showing up?
No, not like, but, you know, you got to remember Iowa is the oldest state in the country, the most elderly state in the country, and those people really do pay very close attention to the Iowa caucuses, and they do show up. But this is the biggest political gathering we've seen since Hillary Clinton made an 11th-hour rally in 2007, eventually losing to Barack Obama. But it was big, and one of the Iowa caucuses are considered a key test of organizational strength. And if that's the test, she passed it with flying colors by getting these people in and getting them all registered on cell phones.
That's
sign-up sheets are gone.
I've been ranting for the last half hour about why does our media not actually talk about real issues? Why do they insist on instead only talking about either scandal, horse race, or well, basically scandal or horse race, you know, and even when they do the news, they do it like reality programming, you know, where you get a topic and a panel of 3 people and you discuss it among yourselves for a half hour, which is not the way that news was before, you know, the '96 media consolidation and and Reagan killing the Fairness Doctrine in '87, and it just astonishes me that literally the only thing that I saw, now, you know, I'm not that huge a consumer of television news, and perhaps you saw something different, but basically the only coverage that I saw of Elizabeth Warren in Iowa was that somebody got up and asked her about, you know, the whole DNA thing. I mean, you know, which is like the least relevant of anything. And by the way, both the New York Times and the Washington Post in those scathing articles about, you know, back when this first came out about how, you know, Native Americans are really angry, literally hadn't interviewed a single elected Native American official. There's over 500 tribes in the United States. Not one. And I don't know if you caught this, but a couple of days ago, Huffington Post went back and started interviewing.
Gave me a good idea.
Yeah, well, Huffington Post went back and actually interviewed people on the reservation, and they love her. Yeah. It's like, you know, they're saying, hey, you know, she's proud of the fact that she's got a Native American in her ancestry. We like that.
Yeah, yeah. No, actually, you know, she made this comment she answered a question in Sioux City in the morning, and so, you know, that's the first story out of the day, and so it dominated the news cycle on that Saturday. And then the next day, the coverage was more about the crowds and how she connected with the crowds as they recovered and were able to write.
But that's horse race stuff. There was still no coverage of what is she saying. Does she want to go back to Glass-Steagall? Does she want to break up the big banks? Does she think that the banking industry is anti-competitive? Does she think that American business, by and large, is anti-competitive? Does she want to raise taxes? Does she want to have free college education? Is she in favor of Medicare for all? Literally, does she want to strengthen Social Security? Literally, none of those issues are raised. I'm starting to think that the reason the media absolutely refuses to raise any of these issues, which they used to do prior to the 1980s, and they really haven't since the Reagan era. I worked in radio news back in the late 60s and early 70s, and we did really good in-depth reporting, and that just all went to hell and somewhere in the 80s. It looks like to me, I'd love to get your opinion as a Pulitzer Prize-winning reporter, and it seems to me like, back pre-1980, Republicans had a really hard time having national power, in large part because they were right up front, and the media was right up front, about the fact that the Republican Party was basically about, cutting taxes on rich people, deregulating companies, and serving the interests of giant corporations. And people thought, well, that's not me. And the Democrats were like, we're the party of the unions, and we're the party of Medicare and Medicaid and Social Security and all those things that the Republicans oppose. And, it seems like now, if on a national program, if you invite a Republican on, and you don't, and you challenge, the commentary, and I realize I'm getting probably way more partisan than you're comfortable with, but it just seems to me like those challenges never happen anymore. I was looking at an interview between Charles, what's his last name? One of the CBS reporters, and Richard Nixon back in '72 or '73, and it was one of the
maybe.
Yeah, it could have been, yeah, and he just took Nixon apart, on national television. Or didn't take him apart. I mean, he asked him hard questions, and he wouldn't put up with BS answers. What has happened to our media?
Well, I don't know. I think maybe you could say that Lester Holt did the same thing when he got Trump on the record, about firing Comey.
Yeah, that was a moment of actual journalism. But
let's give him a little credit.
Yeah, but the issues, I'm hearing no conversation about Social Security. We know that the Republican Party says
there's absolutely no conversation on the campaign trail among anybody, Democrat or Republican, state or federal level, about climate change.
Amazing.
And
that's shocking.
It gets a passing mention, but then what are we actually doing about it?
Yeah.
No, those issues don't get really covered, and it's part of this, as you say, the cable news cycle, and now, the Twitterverse. How can you how can you explain the consolidation of the pork industry to somebody in 28 words on Twitter?
Right.
But Warren was talking in general terms about that, about how the big chemical companies have taken over all the seed companies, for example,
right.
And control the entire ag supply chain from top to bottom. She was discussing that here in Iowa this weekend.
Wow.
And
that's a big deal,
Yeah, and we're reporting on it, and the Des Moines Register was reporting on it, and the Washington Post got around to it today. And but yeah, I mean, it is difficult to get a discussion of these issues in when every press, there were 125 reporters covering this event, and everybody wants to get a question in, and you've got 2 minutes to do it.
Yeah. The whole format is also kind of hostile to any serious conversation about issues.
Yeah, when the Iowa caucuses started, there would. I remember Senator Paul Simon wandering into the office and just alone, unannounced, and sat there for 2 hours with me talking about the Farm Bill.
Wow. Those days are gone. All right, I got to run here, but thank you so much for dropping by.